Hello everybody. So today I am going to speak about a visual arts project that's rather new. It's called Liquid Earth, and it's been inspired in many respects by techniques you'd associate with an archaeological dig. And the heart of the project was a workshop that I led in late August, just gone, the last week in August. And I had a filmmaker there throughout the week of the workshop. So at the moment I'm cutting video documentation, and that material will be woven into a moving image work. So that aspect of the project is, work in progress. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to concentrate on the activities and the approach of that week-long workshop. So I've made some participatory projects in the past, which have been motivated by this intention to try to feel closer to this ancient stratified ground that we live on, and to do this by examining the material remains which have come up through this ancient ground to us. And this project, Liquid Earth, is the first time that I kind of combined this approach with my background as a potter. My mom is a production potter, and she taught me how to throw. And along with that, growing up, she also, I guess by osmosis and being co-opted into things, but since I was a kid, I was made aware, in a very real sense, of the clay seams that lie in the part of the world where I grew up and where I now live, which is West Waterford, Ardmore in West Waterford. So I very much lent on those kind of practices in developing this project. So the central idea kind of behind this project was to take a short stretch of coast around Ardmore. It's about a mile long, a beach about a mile long, and to work with some of the very plentiful amounts of mostly plastic that have been coming in on the tide. Also, lots of odd things that come in on the tide, a bit of a beachcomber, fragments of bones and ropes, but predominantly plastics. So through this project, I really wanted to take those fragments seriously in a way, and also be fanciful with them, and kind of be mindful that these objects, though they're all broken down and fragmented through the actions of the water, but that they used to have a use function, and kind of be fanciful with them in imagining that somehow these broken fragments could somehow be indicators or harbingers for some kind of future form. So to ask them strange questions like, what might our future human lips want, or what kind of future containers or supports might we need? So in a way to catch these objects as they're coming apart, and to think about how they might be able to come back together to serve us differently. So what did we do? We, I guess, took on a lot of slow rhythms in a way. We did a lot of walking along this stretch of coast. We gathered these odds and ends, and we also gathered clay, because there are pockets of clay, pottery clay at the back of this shore. And we bring all of these odds and ends back to a nearby field. And what we did was, using these broken up objects, we made plaster casts from them so that we would then have the ability to use the liquid form of the local clay to basically rely on slip casting methods to pour this local clay into the dried plaster cast, and use these broken fragments as the basis on which to kind of future dream, or like I say, kind of ask questions of these broken up oddments. So this image shows this the workshop setting. This is our local Tidy Towns field, and this was our HQ for the week. And as you can see, quite a makeshift setup. And this is an image of us at the back of the beach. I think in this instance, we're gathering clay. And that's some of the local clay just laid out in the field as we dried it. So a lot of these processes just inherently took time. Selection of some of the plastic bits that we gathered. And here's Eilish, one of the participants who had found this amazing bone, and here she is involved in the, depending on the object, but demanding in this instance task of figuring out how to make a plaster cast from this object. It really involves, like I say, taking these objects seriously, like really handling them, squinting at them, turning them around in your hands, and seeing, just figuring out what we could do with them somehow. So again, this is part of the cast making process. This is Eilish's bone again, which she's prepared to have a plaster cast made of it, and you can see the liquid plaster there being poured through. Again here, the plaster having hardened, removing the walls. Again, in process kind of images of the methods. And here we see the first objects kind of emerging. So this is Betty's project, where she has poured the liquid clay in, and here one of the copies is coming out. And this is a selection of some of the plaster casts that we gathered kind of as the week went on, and some of the objects that are emerging from these casts. So as the days went on and we got into the kind of slow rhythms around this gathering and building processes, I was really keen to circulate images that would kind of remind us of this long history we have of object making as humans, and this feeding this awareness that these shapes we've inherited are nebulous and kind of change form as people's needs change. So a little whistle stop here. One random example, I think this is 8th, 9th century BC. This is a helmet that apparently was a really good design for deflecting arrows. A Roman cooking pot, which I'm sure was cutting edge technology at the time, allowing you to cook 3 types of food at once over a fire. And I was keen to also be kind of circulating images of people who are thinking hard about what future forms us humans might need. And this is an image by a contemporary American artist, Andrea Zitel. This is A to Z sorting trays, and she's thinking in really broad and creative ways about how it is that we organize the things we need, including our food. So this is a kind of proposition that she put forward as possibly being a useful way of organizing in the future. This is an image I lifted from a Victorian Albert Museum exhibition that only recently closed called The Future Starts Here. Again, the premise of that show was to think about what future forms we might need, and this particular image relates to a project called Aeroscene Explorer, and it's modelling in a very micro form of what they think in the future might be a viable way of using solar energy and air currents to float enormous buildings. So the logic for me in circulating images like these is to kind of underline this sense that it's often the complexity of the environment in which we live which is a real influencer on the shapes that we inherit. So kind of speaking to that was this idea that I brought through the workshop as well, was to invite people who had very particular perspectives on the landscape which was local to where we were working. And I invited a few speakers to come and visit us and kind of share their observations. One person was a local naturalist called Andrew Malcolm, who's been studying in a really serious and sustained way the ocean around all the headlands in Ardmore. He's been looking for patterns in whale life and seabird activities, and it was really interesting to hear him speak about these findings, but it was also interesting to hear him speak about how it's affected his body. And he spoke a lot about how looking in this really sustained way has affected his peripheral vision, for instance. Another speaker who came was a geologist, Betty Higgs from UCC, and giving us an insight into the pressures and pulls that have given us the actual physical landscape that we were living in amongst, and also given pretty powerful forces like plate tectonics, kind of future forecasting, where the Earth was on the move to. And here's Jacinta Kiley speaking to us. She's a local field archaeologist, and she described all of the material remains that the few archaeological digs have given us that indicate the different waves of settlement that has come through that area. So where all these contributions settle within the work that we ended up making that week, I'm not quite sure. It's certainly going to be present in the moving image work that I'm cutting. But this is some work that one of the participants in the workshop made, Henry, based on a little plastic fragment that reminded him of a way that we might be able to organise pills into the future. And this is another person who made a cast from a piece of wood, and they were thinking about how into the future our index fingers were going to be especially tired given all the scrolling pressures that we put our index fingers under at the moment. So I guess I'll wrap up by saying that these slow, kind of steady activities, such as the ones I've been describing around gathering and making and slip casting, that they remind us that we need to think really hard about the materials we leave to clean up and sort through into the future. And these practices also remind us that the assumptions we make about the structures and forms we inherit as being solid, that this is a misnomer, and they're actually inherently just on the move, and that the shapes our future forms take, that they're up for grabs. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.